Welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Podcast, hosted by CRM technology and sales process expert Christopher Smith, talking with sales leaders that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Listen to find out how the best of the best achieve success with their team and CRM technology. And remember, unless you are the lead dog, the view never changes.
Welcome to Sales Lead Dog. Today, I have joining me Mark Rooney of Bry-Air. Mark is the strategy director for Bry-Air. Mark, welcome to Sales Lead Dog.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Great having you on here, Mark. Mark, tell me a little bit about Bry-Air.
Sure. So Bry-Air is a manufacturer of desiccant dehumidification equipment, and that's primarily for, I'll say, like industrial applications. So think food and beverage, pharmaceutical, spaces that need to be highly regulated and dialed in pretty closely.
This is I love having companies like this on the podcast because a lot of people don't think about companies like Bry-Air, but they're critical component when it comes to anything. Like you're saying, you need a controlled environment. What makes that happen? What's behind having that controlled environment? There's a whole bunch of companies out there that make this stuff happen, and Bry-Air's one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into, I'll say, the development and engineering, of a lot of these industrial, facilities. And so if you think about like a pharmaceutical environment, what we're doing, and we're just a piece of the overall puzzle, but we're helping the owner, the engineer, and the contractor ultimately deliver, a facility that's going to be, from an environmental standpoint, really dialed in to help, the overall process and really kind of minimize moisture, in the air so that the owner can make, the product that they're ultimately shipping.
Yeah, and have it be consistent and not have to worry about quality issues, all of that.
Absolutely.
It's very cool. When you think back over your career, and you've had a real progression as a sales leader in your career, what are the three things that have really led and driven to your success?
Sure. So the three things that come to mind is, the first one's really continuing to be curious and learn. There's multiple ways to do, to get from point A to B. Because I'm doing it, the first way, someone else could be doing it a different way, and it could be better, right? So I'm a big believer in just, continue learning, asking questions and really kind of digging in. The second thing would really be, structured problem solving. And so, as it applies to sales, thinking through how you're trying to get from where you are today to a future state. And so really kind of thinking through, am I going to target new customers? Am I going to, release a new product? There's multiple different ways to achieve, goals and results. But I think, it takes a lot of thought and organized thought at that. And the third thing is really networking, making sure that you continue, building and expanding your network, I think is crucial, especially if you're younger in your career. Make sure that you're having conversations, within your industry and even outside, right? So you never know kind of what contact, you'll have to call or want to call in the future.
Networking is one of those things I didn't really value or understand when I was younger. And
Absolutely.
It is so important to have that network as you get further in your career. I mean, it's important all the time, but man, does it help these days.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially right now, coming out of COVID and things like that, I think I think it'll continue to be very important, as you want to get different inputs and thoughts and, mentorship.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned your engineering background. You came out of Penn State. as an engineer. When you look back, you're, going through college, you're graduating. Did you ever anticipate getting into sales?
So yes. And prior to going to Penn State for mechanical engineering, I caddied when I was growing up. So I started caddying when I was about 13 or 14 years old, and I really enjoyed the people component of it, and really kind of what made me think about like the sales route is working with people on a daily basis, and customers at that, being able to listen to customers, and like specifically from a golfing standpoint, some people just wanted you to carry the bag, and some people wanted you to carry the bag, talk to them about life, or read a putt or pull a club. So really, I guess the connection there is the people aspect, and then I'll say the more technical mind for engineering. And so ultimately, I did want to get into the technical sales path, and did that.
Yeah. So what was the hardest or biggest lesson that you learned early in your career when it comes to sales?
I would say the biggest thing that I learned is I would say the problem solving. And what I mean by that is typically, when you're in a sales role, your boss or whomever is going to give you a target at the, January 1st, ideally, and say, here's what, your bookings and revenue, gross margin targets are for the year. And so I think you have to be organized in the approach as a salesperson in how you're going to achieve that. And so over my career and looking back on it, I think that that's incredibly important to put thought into that, right? And use analytics and data to be able to support the path that you're going to take.
Okay. When you're working through your early career in sales, did you have any difficulty managing failure, or losing those big deals? Was that hard? Was that difficult for you, or was that easy for you to move on from?
Yeah, I think I think there were components of it that were difficult. And looking back on, I would say the losses and the failures of specific, opportunities, I would say in hindsight, I could have done a better job of really identifying the customer,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're and specifically in B2B sales, you may be communicating with one person, but you have to understand there's 3, 4, 10, really decision makers behind the scenes that are taking part in the evaluation, right? So it could be a commercial component of it, of pricing, terms and conditions, payment terms, whatever they might be. And then on the engineering side, you have to be able to check all the boxes. And so, looking back on the failures, I think the things that I could have done better is really thinking through, the evaluation metrics and how the ultimate, decision was going to be made and weighted.
To move the deal forward.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. 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 I think that's common, especially in young. You're willing to chase the wind, and wherever the wind's blowing, that's where you're going to go. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's like you got to learn, like you got to focus, you got to, identify which are the ones that actually have potential to do something and add value, and that's a good fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. Maybe you didn't notice, but I can relate to that.
Yeah. Oh, you have to know where to spend your time, and
Yeah.
I think more importantly, where not to spend your time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You have to figure out how to say no, not a good fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that would probably be the second thing is you have to learn to say no, especially
Yep.
early in your career. And
Yep.
I think there's ways to do it. Just say, hey, this isn't the best technical fit
Yep.
between, you and I right now. And, here's a recommendation for someone that I know that might be able to help you better. And I
Right.
think that goes a long way, in the customer's mind or the client's mind to say, okay, he's helping me,
Mhm.
right, get where I'm trying to go.
I think that's so important, like to be able to say no, but also say, here's someone who can help you. Then you're immediately in that trusted advisor role, you
Right,
know.
exactly.
And eventually, I've heard talk to many people come back and say, "Oh yeah, 3 years later, 5 years later, whatever, they called me again, and I got this big deal from it."
Yeah, yeah. You never know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So let's talk about your transition into leadership. What was behind your decision to say, "I want to go from carrying a quota to leading a team"?
Sure. So, a few years into the individual contributor, I was very successful, in that role, and I always, wanted to get into the managerial and the leadership, track because, I enjoy working with people and really kind of coaching them to get better, on an individual basis. And so, there was an opportunity, and I was talking to my boss at the time for probably 2 years prior to me actually taking that position, and so he was fully aware of it, and I was working on some things that he pointed out, in terms of in order to take a managerial role, here's what your strengths are, and here's some opportunities for improvement. I worked on those for 2 years and was able to step into that managerial role. Um, you know, and my intent at the time was really to coach the people that would report to me on what I thought were best practices were for processes and procedures, and then really work with them to kind of build out a sales model.
Well, looking back to that time, did you have a perception on what it would be like that role versus the reality of what it was, and what was different between the two?
Yes, I think there was, a big difference. So from a perception standpoint, I thought it was going to be more, maybe more, customer facing in
Mhm.
terms of, go see customers, I'll say 75% of the time. And whereas in reality, what it was probably like 25% of the time was out seeing customers, 75% of the time was really working internally, to the company, whether that be, with my direct reports, operations, engineering, or other functions within the company on really kind of developing different, items or handling different issues.
Yeah. Did you like that part, or did you like being in front of the customer better?
So looking back, I enjoy both. I enjoy, and I think it's still crucial, as you move up in your career to still be in front of the customer, to be able to listen to them for feedback. Um, but I do like and continue to like working internally to really improve processes and the overall customer experience.
Mhm.
And so through my career, I've always made it a point to, really develop quality relationships internally and maintain them, because you're going to have to work together with that function or person. So you want to be able to explain, hey, I'm trying to do this because of it, in order to help the customer at the end of the day, and it will be a better experience for us as well.
Yeah. Um, I when I look back on my career, I think one of the things I wanted to be, in a leadership role very early in my career because I just I had a complete misunderstanding of what it really meant to be a leader. Um, and that was a struggle for me early on. Um, was it easy for you to step into that role as a manager, or if it wasn't, what did you struggle with?
I think there was definitely a learning curve for sure. And especially when you go from really the individual contributor and your sole focus, or 90% of your focus is customer
Yeah.
based. Whereas, what I had to learn is really the time management aspect of it in the managerial role or leadership role. And so what I think was, I think it's, a weekly thing that I still try to do, is making sure that you spend enough time, with your direct reports, in order to help them really develop as people and have the conversation with them. What do you want out of your career? Where are you trying to get? And let's collectively put together, a plan to help you get there. And I think that's incredibly important, and something that I still continue to do, really helping my people be the best they can.
Yeah. Um, a lot of people, I think, struggle between the difference between a manager and a leader. In your mind, what's the difference between a manager and a leader?
Sure. So I think the main difference is a manager seems to be perhaps more reactive and really kind of just managing the day to day, whereas a leader is able to help, his or her team manage the day to day, but also look out in the future and really kind of help develop the team. And I think there's when it comes to leadership, I think it's really like people focused, being able to help teach and coach and walk, their team through kind of where they want to be and help make them successful, in their career or personal life.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the main difference.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective. What's your favorite thing in your current role?
My favorite thing in the current role is every day is different.
Hmm.
And so even though I'm the director of strategy, for the company, I own the P&L for a business unit, which is really fun, honestly. With my engineering background, I really love numbers. I love financial statements, looking through those. And so, at the beginning of the year, I put together, a pretty long slide deck on, initiatives, or, how we're going to get from point A to point B by the end of the year. And I would say January and February, I worked with our team and said, okay, here's what we're going to do, and, kind of walk them through that. And so now, end of March, we're executing on that. And so we're making tweaks here and there, to the overall plan and strategy. But every day is different, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I bet. I'm the same. That's why I like consulting. Is every client I go into, it's a whole new experience, a whole new set of problems,
Right.
and it doesn't get stale. It's not the same old at all. It's every day is a new challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun.
Yeah, and there's no better way to push yourself. You force yourself to grow, get yourself out of your comfort zone. You need that variety, those challenges.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Like the comfort zone aspect of it too is that no client engagement or opportunity is exactly the same.
Right.
And so it gives you the ability to see different aspects of it, different perspectives, and really listening to it and seeing how you can add value is very fun.
Yeah. So when you have a team member that's struggling, maybe just is in a down cycle. Everyone gets in a down cycle time or two. Um, what's your strategy? I mean, do you try to push them out of their comfort zone, or what do you do to help them through that cycle?
Sure. So I think it's really important to first kind of sit down with them and take it like a diagnostic approach, maybe, and try to understand and pinpoint why that is, right? I mean, it could be something in their personal life that's bleeding over into, work performance, or it could be, the territory or customers that they're calling on just have no work, right? And so and I think each, essentially path in that example, I think just sitting down with them, just understanding why that is, and then
Mhm.
putting together and having the conversation on how do we fix it, right? And making sure that they have input into the overall plan.
Right. What role does mentorship play in your position?
I think mentorship is very important, and I think it's really built on trust. So I do my best to really kind of have that trusting relationship with each of my reports. And, I'm having the conversations right now with my reports in terms of, you're here now, and some of the younger, people on my team, where do you see yourself in next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road? Do you want to stay in sales? If so, great. Like, let's double down and, we'll kind of do like a strengths, weaknesses, and I'll help you kind of get there.
Mhm.
If you want to stay on the individual contributor level, or do you want to get into sales management, or kind of where do you want to go? Where do you want to be in operations or procurement, whatever it is, and really just kind of having that conversation so they know that somebody is looking out and kind of working with them so they can, ultimately be successful in their life.
Do you try to hire, because of the business you're in, the field you're in, it's pretty technical. Are you looking for people with an engineering background, that technical background to be part of your team, or do you find you like to have a mix of technical, non-technical when it comes to your selling to your customers?
So I love a diverse group. I'll say that. Typically, when it comes to the highly technical, I would say, it's pretty standard to, look for an engineering background just because it makes more sense. But with that being said, if there were, other candidates that didn't have the engineering degree, but were still a great fit, then absolutely, would love to talk to them.
Yeah. What are the qualities you're looking for when you're building a team? Are there certain attributes that you try to identify?
So the first one is yes, there are, and I would say really kind of the first one is really communication, right? Are they, especially when it comes to sales, right? Are you comfortable, or do you even desire and enjoy talking to people, right?
Right.
So, um, just making sure that they're in that category, I'll say. And then the second one, I would think is problem solving, that ability, or kind of them being able to talk through how they're trying to solve a problem. Right. And so I
Mhm.
think, when it comes to sales, you have to be able to think through, okay, I have an opportunity that just came across my desk. How are we going to sell it? Right. And so it goes back into, how's it going to be evaluated? Um, you know, what resources, how are we going to put together the proposal that meets and exceeds all those requirements?
Yeah. Um, what about failure? How do you leverage um, your experiences with those losing big deals to mentor and coach your team?
Yeah, so what I like to do is, whether it be on a quarterly or annual basis, is go through the data, and typically I'll do it, and then we'll have a meeting on it, right? And really kind of dissect opportunities that are lost and try to understand why. And we try to capture that in our CRM as much as possible and as granular as possible, in order to evaluate kind of where we were. I mean, if it's pricing and, try to use that information as much as possible to help us get better.
Right.
I mean, it could, there's just a variety of different components that go into, why you would lose, an opportunity. But for sure, I think looking through it and understanding it at a high level is very important, and to go through it as a team.
Yeah. Sounds like that's also an opportunity for you to build trust with your team in terms of how you approach that and execute in those retrospectives.
Absolutely. Yeah. And typically, what I'll say, in the beginning of those meetings is that, this is not a personal thing. We're not looking to call out somebody who lost an opportunity. Everybody's lost something in their life, unless you're not trying hard enough. Right. And you're just going after the ones that you're going to win. And so I like to see the losses, but I think it's very important to learn from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's the best learning opportunities when you're falling down. And how do I prevent that from happening again?
Right.
I imagine you have fairly complex sales process in terms of the deals you're putting together. Is that accurate?
That's pretty accurate. Yes.
And you're doing a lot of team selling, or is it solo selling?
So there's some team selling. I would say it depends on the complexity of the opportunity.
Okay.
And so ideally, from our, standpoint, we want to be involved as early as possible, in the sales process when it's, I'll say, like a back of napkin, concept, right? Is our goal is to be involved in that conversation, work with the engineer to write the specs, talk to the owner, understand, what their evaluation criteria is, how we can best support them through the process and through the sale. And so getting back to your question is that, a lot of times we might have to pull in our parts and service group to talk about aftermarket support. We might have to pull in engineering, the director of engineering, who can answer highly technical questions, things like that.
Yep. Yep. So how do you manage all that? As a leader, a lot of times you're playing traffic cop, right? And
Yes.
it's how do you manage that to keep everyone focused on the right things and not get wrapped around the axle?
Sure. So I think it's incredibly important for the sales team to have those relationships with those other functions. And so I try to cultivate, that culture of have as an individual salesperson, have a relationship with engineering, have the relationship with parts and service or the other functions or legal, procurement, make sure you develop those internal relationships so you can pick up the phone and call if you need engineering to come to a meeting or whatever it might be. So I try to communicate out, especially in my role, is that you don't need to come to me in order to play the traffic cop. Build the relationships and, feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, it'd make your job a lot tougher if you're always the center of the universe. That's a tough spot to put yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's transition the conversation a little bit. CRM, do you love it or do you hate it?
I love CRM. I'll say that.
What do you love? If you had to maybe top three things, what are the top three things you love about CRM?
Sure. So the top three, I would say, is really the sales funnel and how you use that to manage your short-term activities, but also long-term. And so I think when, I talk to my salespeople is making sure that we're devoting enough time to those opportunities that are closing in the next 30, 60, 90 days, but also looking out towards the end of the year or into next year and making sure that we have a good backlog of upcoming opportunities that'll support, the bigger goals, the revenue goals or booking goals that I have. So that would be the first one. And I would say the other thing that I really like about CRM, and especially for me with the engineering background, is the data and analytics that I can pull out of there. And so, there's various things that I use it for. I would say one of them is really a win-loss tracking. And so I can see if, by targeting certain customers in a certain industry. I mean, for example, that's one of our main focuses this year, is being able to track how we're performing in a certain market as we roll out new initiatives. And so that's one of them. Pricing is another one. Pricing like analytics, I'm starting to use it for that. But from an analytical standpoint, I think it's incredibly helpful.
What's the hardest thing or the biggest struggle you have with CRM today?
The hardest thing I would say is when it comes to the individual contributor, it's having them follow a regular cadence on I say a weekly basis to update opportunities, to make sure that everything is accurate. So when I pull it down and kind of analyze the reports, that everything is accurate. So I would say that's probably the single hardest thing when it comes to CRM implementation. And I think there's a fine line between, and especially as, a leader of our sales group, is what does that look like? Is it, every day, which I think is too much, or is it, monthly? And I think that's too long. So I think there's a healthy balance and line in there to walk.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the moment. When I'm working with a client, that if you're in there working that deal, that's when you update it.
Right.
That, if I'm sending an email or scheduling an appointment, I'm tracking that into that customer record while I'm doing that. So
Sure.
I've got that visibility. Because if you do it in the moment, it takes a few seconds. Trying to do that stuff at the end of the week becomes a burden. Now I'm like, oh crap,
Sure.
I got to spend the next 3 hours updating CRM. I just want to go play golf or whatever. I want to start my
Right.
weekend. I don't want to spend 3 hours doing data entry. And
Sure.
what about, how much does CRM help you? You mentioned earlier that you're establishing key initiatives for your team throughout the year. How much is CRM helping you drive those key initiatives?
I would say it's a huge component of it.
Yeah.
Especially for historical tracking and forward-looking tracking. When it comes to, I'll just use sales within a certain industry as an example, is that I could look back and kind of look at a base bookings or revenue, from a certain market. But if we're investing into, growing sales within that market, being able to see how it trends over time. And so when I look back and I typically do it on a quarterly basis, just looking back to see, is what we're doing working? Or will it be working, in the next year? Or do I need to essentially pull back the capital that I'm investing into this market and redeploy it into another one? So it's very, very useful.
That's really good to hear, because that's one thing I see a lot, where there seems to be a disconnect between the alignment of CRM to help drive and support those key initiatives, or they're managing it outside of it, like an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, because CRM's not working for us, so I'm doing it in Excel.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so, yeah, because that's the last thing. If you're in Excel, man, that makes your life as a leader just hard, because now you're an Excel jockey versus doing what you need to be doing.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I tried not to use Excel as much as possible, just, for that, right? I mean, if it could be automated, then that's even better.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Mark, we're coming up on our time here on Sales Lead Dog. I really appreciate you coming on the show. People want to reach out, connect with you, learn more about Bry-Air, or just connect with you personally. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn, which I'll put my URL in the show notes, and happy to talk to anybody that reaches out.
Yeah, so we'll have all that information in our show notes, where you'll get Mark's connection into his link to LinkedIn. You check out his profile, check out Bry-Air. You can also find this episode and the show notes at impellercrm.com/sales lead dog, where you'll find not only this episode, but all our episodes of Sales Lead Dog. So be sure to check that out, subscribe, follow us so you don't miss an episode. Mark, thanks again for coming on Sales Lead Dog, and welcome to the Sales Lead Dog Pack.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
As we end this discussion on Sales Lead Dog, be sure to subscribe to catch all our episodes. On social media, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Watch the videos on YouTube, and you can also find our episodes on our website at impellercrm.com/Sales Lead Dog. Sales Lead Dog is supported by Impeller CRM, delivering objectively better CRM for business, guaranteed.